Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, February 25th, if you are just tuning in. We just finished going over what a perfect offseason might look like for the Seattle Seahawks. In this segment, we turn our attention over to baseball. Spring training is all the way back, and we have one more team to go over in the AL West before we move on to the Central Divisions. That team, of course, is the Vegas A's. No, the Oakland A's. No, the Sacramento A's. We'll talk about what their season might hold based on what they did this offseason coming up in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, February 25th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the Oakland Athletics, or the Sacramento Athletics here. They had a very interesting offseason. Of course, the main thing that's going on with them is the fact that they now play in Sacramento. They officially moved out of Oakland. They said they were going to go play in Vegas, but their stadium is not quite ready yet. For now, they're playing at the home of the Sacramento River Cats, the River Cats of the Pacific Coast League. It's a MLB-sized stadium, but it still is a minor league park. 330 to left, 403 to center. This is a little bit of a smaller ballpark. So look at a lot of runs, a lot of home runs this season from a guy like Brent Rooker, who they extended for 5 years, $60 million. The A's also did something out of character for them this year. They spent money, which is something that the fans had been really, really wanting them to do in Oakland. The fan base in Oakland was great, and that ownership wanted to just get out of there as soon as possible. It's an awful situation. They should be shunned for it, honestly, but instead, they get a brand new stadium, lots of funding in a big city, and now they decide that they want to go out and build a competitive team. They started off this offseason by making an aggressive move, acquiring Jeffrey Springs and Jacob Lopez from the Rays, giving away a couple of prospects, including Joe Boyle, Will Simpson, and Jacob Waters, as well as a competitive balance pick in round A of the first round. So that's right after the first round. We're looking at picks 36-ish in this year's draft. That is a pretty solid prospect that they're giving away to the Rays for two starters that could turn into something in Jacob Lopez and Jeffrey Springs, who's going to come into the rotation this season. Outside of that big trade, they also spent the most money that they have spent in a single offseason ever. They gave the biggest contract in the history of the organization out to Luis Severino, a 3-year, $67 million deal, the biggest contract in A's history. Luis Severino's coming off a pretty solid season. It's not something that, really deserves the biggest contract in a team's history. But when the biggest contract in a team's history is sitting at $22 million AAV, it's not the worst deal. 3.91 ERA and 31 starts for Severino last season. He comes over and now he's going to be the ace for this team. That's going to be a really interesting thing. Of course, as I mentioned, they extended Brent Rooker, their best player on offense. 5 years, $60 million is a great deal for your DH. He's had 30 home runs in back-to-back seasons. He had 39 last year that concluded with a 5.1 F-WAR season at DH. That is fourth in his position, only behind the three best hitters, three best DHs in all of baseball, in Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, and Yordan Alvarez. And Yordan Alvarez was basically at the same WAR value as him. Yet Alvarez finished at 5.3. Brent Rooker finished at 5.1. So we're looking at an extremely talented hitter. You put him in a ballpark like Sacramento, he might hit 45, 50 home runs this season. He's going to have a huge year. Aside from that, they were pretty active in building their bullpen. Dylan Floro had a pretty solid season last year. They brought him in at a minor league deal. They also bring in Jose Leclerc, 1 year, $10 million on. He had a 30.9% K rate last season. You pair him up with re-signing TJ McFarland to add some depth to that bullpen on a 1 year, $1.8 million deal. This is a team that's continuing to build that bullpen. And a bullpen, I think that honestly is pretty solid. They bring in Gio Urshela to play that hot corner on a pretty short deal, 1 year, $2.15 million. Not a bad spot for him, as well as bringing in some infield depth with a guy that can play just about anywhere in Luis Urias on a 1 year, $1.1 million deal. So they spent a lot of money this offseason to go out and get these guys to make their team better. But it didn't come without a couple losses. They move on from Danny Jimenez, Scott Alexander, Ross Stripling, Alex Wood, and Trevor Gott. So all in all, their additions this offseason definitely outweigh their losses. I really do like the additions of some of those relief pitchers. I do love the extension for Brent Rooker. Get your guys in the building. It's something that they were really bad at doing the last couple of seasons when they were in Oakland. Now that they're moving, maybe they can change their ways here. So when we look at their lineup, it's not that bad. They have a really fun outfield. Right fielder and leadoff hitter, Lawrence Butler. These are all projected lineups from Fangraphs if you wanted to go check it out. Lawrence Butler leading off, Brent Rooker hitting second, JJ Bleday in center hitting third, Shea Langoliers at catcher. He's someone to keep an eye on. He's pretty solid, hitting fourth in the cleanup role. Tyler Soderstrom at first base, Zach Galoff at second base, Seth Brown or Miguel Andujar in left field should be a lot of fun. Gio Urshela or Luis Urias at third, and Jacob Wilson at short. A guy really young. They've got a really young infield. It's probably a weaker spot. The outfield's going to be a lot of fun. Obviously, we talked about Brent Rooker. He's going to have a great season. The infield should be interesting. It's definitely the weak spot of this team, but it's something that could be a strength if Langoliers continues to develop. If Jacob Wilson, a young shortstop, can take a big step up, maybe Gio Urshela or Luis Urias can really go into form at third base. I'm not super excited. I'm not too confident that that is something that could happen, but it is definitely a possibility. When we look at their pitching rotation, it's not all that bad. You have Luis Severino as your ace, Jeffrey Springs in that trade from the Tampa Bay Rays as your starting pitcher two, JP Sears at 3, Osvaldo Bido at 4, and Mitch Spence. All of these guys, if you look at their FWAR last season, was above average, right? They all had positive WARs. Now, that's not necessarily the end all be all, but to do that on some of the teams that they were on, I think is pretty impressive. I really do. Especially at the bottom of the order, these guys that were on the A's last season had over 1 WAR last season. Is pretty good. I'm excited to see how they can build on it this year. And when we look at the bullpen, of course, you have your closer, Mason Miller, one of the best closers in all of baseball, a guy that can throw 104 easy, electric stuff. Amazing closer. You also add 2 setup guys in Jose Leclerc and Tyler Ferguson, who both had an over 30% strikeout rate last season, as well as Michael Otanes, who also over 30% last season. Those guys can strike out these guys with the best of them. You've got a solid back end of the bullpen. The rest of it is fine. Dylan Floro, 3.9 ERA last season. TJ McFarland, they bring back Grant Hallman, Noah Murdoch as your long reliever. Overall, this team, I think, really did do a great job this offseason. It isn't a super flashy offseason, right? They didn't make these massive moves that are going to make them a playoff team. They of course, are a team that went just 69-93, fourth in their division, missed the playoffs last season, but I do definitely see the improvement with this roster. If a couple of their guys can take big steps up, they're young guys that they're counting on, I think this is a team that could surprise some people. The over-under for this team is set at 71.5 wins. I'm looking at them to win 75 games pretty easy. I think they top out probably at about 80 games, 500. I don't think they make the playoffs either way, and they're in a little bit of a tough division. They've got the Mariners, the Astros, and the Rangers all ahead of them, so I don't think they can quite get ahead of those 3 teams, but I think they can pretty comfortably be 4th and be closer to the 3rd place team in that division in probably the Astros being 3rd place in that division. than they are to the Angels, who I think are just dead last in that division. So I really am impressed with this A's team. Hopefully they can continue to build with this, because they do deserve to have some happiness, the A's fans, especially after the team got ripped away from them for no reason at all. But let me know what your thoughts are. What do you think the A's are going to do this season? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. And thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We will be back tomorrow going over everything from around the world of sports, including some more previews of the MLB season, some more off-season previews for the NFL teams, and the NBA power rankings as we make it into the final stretch right here. We'll see you then. You all have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to